Today, I'm going to show you the 10 most incredible, bizarre, and just plain cool things that I found on Google Earth in 2025. Number 9 is a natural earth painting. 7 is a mysterious formation with no clear explanation. 5 is an otherworldly alien landscape. 2 is a forbidden chasm of stone. And number 1 is the most impressive thing that I found on Google Earth all year that I actually went out and visited. Everything on this list is a relatively to completely unknown and unmarked geologic or geographic feature that was only possible for me to find because of Google Earth. Stuff like this can only be found using satellite imagery, and they're not written down on many maps. Alright, let's get into it. First up is the coolest looking Rincon that I have ever found. It looks like a perfect teardrop. A Rincon is an old, cut-off river bend in a canyon. This occurs when a meandering river cuts through a wall, forming a new, more direct pathway. This leaves an empty crater with a tall butte in the middle that the river used to flow around. Many people have heard of oxbow lakes, where a ring-shaped lake is left behind by a meandering river on flat floodplains. Rincons are simply the canyon version of that. I have found dozens of Rincons during my perusing, but none of them look quite as neat as this one. It is located along Utah's Green River, and it's made up of the famous white rim sandstone, which forms very steep cliffs. This likely explains why this Rincon looks so sculpted. It is because this sandstone is particularly resistant to weathering, so it hasn't crumbled away and is instead holding its original shape. While it may not be super impressive from the ground, it certainly is a beautiful sight from above. There's actually another Rincon close by that will soon form, in geologic terms, along the Colorado River, where the river is incredibly close to cutting through this sandstone wall and forming a new, impressive Rincon within Canyonlands National Park. Next up, we head to the Central Rocky Mountains, where I was very happy to come across these. It took me a minute to figure out exactly what these are, but I had no doubt that they would look seriously extraordinary in person. At first I was confused because they closely resemble alluvial fans, which are large fans of rock that form in mountain ranges where water carries sediment and rock out onto a flat plain, forming this nice fan of sediment. However, I thought these looked a little too steep and a little too narrow to be alluvial fans, and I figured maybe instead they are driven by gravity instead of water. Turns out I was right. These are colluvial fans, which describes a slope of sediment or talus that is formed by a gravity-driven process, like mass wasting. Mass wasting just means stuff like rockfall, landslides, and debris flows. Alluvial fans are formed by water, colluvial fans are driven by gravity. These are by far the most stunning and densely numerous colluvial fans that I've ever seen on Google Earth, and I just love how they're all divided up so evenly on this mountain. It kind of makes them look like a giant stripe pattern. They all have a bit of color to them as well, so I think when I visit them in person, it's going to look like a massive rock painting. Now we head thousands of miles across the ocean to New Zealand. This year was the first where I started exploring countries outside of the US more methodically and in depth. New Zealand, as it turns out, is very intriguing from above. Just look at this volcano with a perfect circle of forest around it. I mean, that's just awesome. What I want to focus on for this list, though, is something else mysteriously shaped like a circle, albeit much smaller than that volcano. The feature in question is this strangely circular high mountain lake, which is perched right in the center of a fairly thin ridge. It seems so out of place. It looks like a volcano just decided to spring up in these non-volcanic mountains, or a meteor just happened to miraculously hit this rocky ridge. But no, what actually formed this lake was probably a well-placed glacier that on its way down to the valley managed to carve out a fairly circular depression for a lake to eventually fill. Glaciers commonly carve out depressions that are filled by lakes. These are called tarns. They just aren't usually this circular. I talked about a couple other glacial crater lakes in my Weird Lakes video, and one of them is actually pretty close to this one. I have only ever found 5 good ones across all my searching. This lake seems like the perfect mountaineering destination for me in New Zealand. It's something strange, beautiful, and most importantly, widely unknown about. I could only find a couple photos of this lake online, and Google Maps does not even have a name listed for this lake. Although I don't doubt that New Zealand topographic maps would have a name for it. Either way, I've become pretty obsessed with getting to this place ever since I found it, because I think viewing the lake from the top of the mountain would be a life-changing experience. Might take me a while to get there though. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I love to actually go out and visit the places that I find on Google Earth. Some of these locations require me to travel abroad, which adds a lot of complications, like figuring out how to get reliable cell phone service in another country. That's where the sponsor of today's video, Saily, comes in. Saily is a digital eSIM service that allows you to easily and cheaply get service while traveling abroad, instead of getting screwed over by roaming fees. All you have to do is install the app, choose and purchase a data plan using my code TOPOTRAVELER to get 15% off, and then install the eSIM on your phone. Super easy to do, and then you're good to go as soon as you land. When Martha and I went to Canada last summer, Martha got charged a ridiculous amount of money because of these cell phone company roaming fees. In the future, we will be keeping it simple and using Saily. So go download the Saily app through this QR code or the link in the description, and use my code TOPOTRAVELER at checkout to get 15% off your data plan. Thanks to Saily for making it possible for me to actually go out and visit some of these international destinations in the future. Now let's head from a southern land of rocks and ice to a northern one. Baffin Island in Canada has really captivated me this year, whether it's the insane Mount Thor and Mount Asgard, or the natural artwork of the pocketed flatlands. This place is just crazy. However, for this list, I wanted to focus on what is by far the most puzzling thing I've ever found on this island. And that is these weird, repeating patterns of sediment that look a lot like small branches with pine needles from a coniferous tree, specifically that of a subalpine fir. The thing is, though, I have absolutely no idea what could be forming these patterns. Whatever process it is, it clearly is making a lot of them in this area, but only this area. I've never seen anything else like this outside of this small section of Baffin Island. The landscape looks pretty flat, but it definitely does have this striped pattern, which the needle formations follow. This kind of reminds me of a bunch of parallel sand dunes, which happens a lot in the desert, but these seem to be made of a little bit more consolidated sediment. Either way, I have no idea what made these, but they're definitely pretty cool, and the resemblance to pine needles is really weird. Going there in person wouldn't yield much of a view from the ground, but from a plane or a drone, this might be one of the weirdest natural formations you can find on Earth. Please let me know your guys' theories about what could have made these. Now we head back to the American West, back to the Colorado Plateau, where I found a circular ring of sandstone around a mountain. I'm just now realizing that I have a lot of circular things on this list, so I guess I really like natural circles. The Colorado Plateau has a lot of laccoliths. Laccoliths are volcanic formations that are created when a large body of magma pushes its way up through sedimentary rock layers, and then it gets stuck under one. This causes the magma to be trapped, so it creates this large dome that pushes up the higher sedimentary rock layers without actually bursting through them. Eventually, this magma hardens, and it's exposed as a mountain range as the softer sedimentary layers erode away around it. The most famous example of this are the La Salles in Utah that now tower over Arches and Canyonlands National Park. I figured at the edge of one of these laccolith mountain ranges, because there's a lot on the Colorado Plateau, there must be a place where there's still remnant sandstone that was tilted up during the formation of the laccolith, just around the boundaries of the large dome. My theory was proven correct when I found this amazing partial circle of upturned sandstone that was still clinging to the base of this volcanic peak. I was not expecting it to be in such a perfect ring around the mountain, but that was definitely a nice surprise. I think it would be quite a fun day to hike up through these sandstone fins and then proceed to summit this mountain and look down on the ring from above. I couldn't find many pictures at all of this formation, but there are a couple Google Earth photospheres nearby where you can kind of see them in the distance. Definitely going to be a fun day out in the desert next year. Now we venture far, far north to one of the most desolate and empty places in the entire United States, the Seward Peninsula of Alaska. I was on stream one day when someone mentioned Alaskan tors. I had never heard of them, so I looked it up, and I found out about the mysterious geologic features known as tors. Tors are granite spires of leftover bedrock and intrusions that sit among the wide expanses of tundra in Alaska. They used to be encompassed by rock and sediment, but frost wedging and erosion has exposed them to the surface, where they now tower over a uniform grassland or tundra. They appear bizarre and mystifying due to their stark contrast with the surrounding flat landscape, like a natural Stonehenge of the Arctic. They're extremely important to science because they prove that Alaska was not covered completely by an ice sheet during the last ice age, because if it was, these tors would have been scraped away by the ice. This means that people and animals would have been free to migrate through the region during the last ice age. Anyway, after I learned about them, I set out to find some of them on Google Earth, and I found a lot of them, with the best example being on the Seward Peninsula, where I found a huge group of tors on a hillside. I cannot imagine how otherworldly it would be to walk through this place, especially if it was foggy or rainy. It would probably seem more like a scene of a distant planet in Star Wars than real life. I also spotted more hundreds of miles away in the Alaskan interior, and I assume there are many more out there if I keep looking. These might be one of the more known features on this list, but they are incredibly hard to get to because of their location. Getting to the Seward Peninsula is not an easy task, and actually getting to the tors that I found here would be even harder. But maybe someday. Walking through this mystical garden of rock would definitely be worth the trip. The next find on this list is by far the smallest, but sometimes those are the most rewarding things to find on Google Earth. I was searching around the Central Rocky Mountains again when I came across an area that had quite a few cool-looking rock formations. Nothing crazy, but definitely promising stuff, like a potential high mountain slot canyon, and really neat-looking fractured layers of rock. As I kept poking around, I stumbled across this thing. What looks to be a perfectly split giant boulder. And I mean perfect. That might be the straightest natural line I have ever seen. It looks like this thing got sliced in half by a knife, like it was a block of cheese. I know I called it small, but it is a pretty sizable boulder at nearly 52 feet long along the straight fracture. Some of the other boulders around it also look very interesting, like some that appear to be near perfect cubes. These might be very similar to the perfect cube of stone that the POV channel featured in one of his videos. Who knows? Either way, I need to get out to this boulder field to see what's going on with this perfectly straight line. Maybe it's just a glitch in the imagery, but I'm hoping that this is truly a perfectly split boulder. For number 3, we're going all the way down to southern Chile, to another circle-related find. I swear that this is the last one. I was checking out various volcanoes in southern Chile when I realized that this one, Volcan Puaihu, has something crazy in its summit crater. It's got circular crevasses. When I saw that, I was stunned. I've looked at a lot of glaciers, and obviously none of them have circular crevasses. They usually just form parallel lines, or often arcs. But it makes sense. There's a sheet of ice in this circular crater, and the lowest point is in the center. So the ice is naturally going to fracture in a circular pattern because of that. I just have looked at so many summit craters and never seen that happen, so I never even imagined it as a possibility. But now that I have seen it, it makes perfect sense. There are probably others out there. I just haven't checked every volcano on Earth yet. So far, this is the only one I have found. What makes this place even cooler is these crevasses are probably only visible for a very small window during the late summer or fall, because this is a very wet area of South America. So the summit crater is probably often buried by snow, which would obscure the underlying ice. And even when it isn't buried, it seems that there's often a small layer of snow on the ice that just completely covers up the crevasses. We are lucky enough that this satellite imagery was taken when there wasn't any snow covering the summit or the ice. When I checked the historical imagery, many of the previous years didn't show the circles. and almost all of the aerial and summit photos I could find didn't show them either. So it seems like this might be an incredibly difficult thing to actually see in person. That's not all, however. For quite a while, I failed to realize the other amazing thing about this mountain while I was distracted by the crevasses. Look closely. This mountain looks like it's covered by snow when this imagery was taken, right? Wrong. If you zoom in, you can see that this is grayish-white sediment, probably ash, that is covering a massive area around the mountain, around 85 square miles. You can see the difference between the ash and a small patch of snow here. I assume that this ash was deposited during past eruptions, such as the most recent one in 2012, which was actually quite large. This large area is almost completely devoid of any plant life, and you can see how barren it is in a couple of photos and photospheres of people lower down on the mountain. It just does not look like a place on planet Earth. And there's more. Among the 85 square mile area of lifeless gray ash, there are several pitch black basaltic lava flows. There are some photos in this area, and it just looks alien. The contrast between the light ash and the dark black basalt is just awesome. And there's even more. There's also really large canyons cutting straight through ash deposits that I can't find photos of, but I can imagine that it would be pretty cool looking as vegetation creeps up into the lifeless gray. Basically, this place has just blown me away by the sheer amount of not only stunning, but really unusual features. I would love to summit this volcano, gaze down into the summit cone, and then spend a day or two exploring the alien landscape of ash and lava on the north side of the mountain. I could talk about this place forever, so let's move on to number 2. The second coolest place I found this year is back in the Colorado Plateau, where I do a good chunk of my searching. I was on stream when the question came up of, are there any huge sandstone features that are on private land in Utah? That was a very intriguing question to me, so I hopped on CalTopo and found some areas of private land near other large sandstone features. That is when I came upon this place, an enormous, literal chasm of sandstone etched into the side of a mountain. And what is better is it's in an area of high quality imagery, so we can see almost exactly what it would look like in real life. It is comprised of towering sandstone walls, a sizable overhang at the base, a slot canyon, a potential waterfall, and a lake held entirely in stone, as well as a green meadow right in the middle, which might be one of the coolest places to camp for a night on planet Earth. To even get in here, you would either have to rappel down almost 1,000 vertical feet of sheer cliff, or swim through the lake that completely blocks the entrance. Like I mentioned earlier, though, this is on private land, so nobody, including myself, is allowed to go here legally. That is, unless I got permission from the landowners, and at this moment, I don't know who that is. The fact that this is off limits and restricted makes it all the more enticing, though, because odds are, not many people have seen this place outside of the landowners. I am going to do all in my power to get permission to visit this place. I just have to know what it looks like to sit there in that meadow and be completely encompassed by 1,000-foot tall sandstone walls. Don't get me wrong, I have been in deep canyons before, but this place literally only has one small exit, making it less of a canyon and more of a chasm. Before we get to the coolest place I found and visited in 2025, I first wanted to throw in a couple of honorable mentions that I won't go into detail about, but they deserve a place on this list. First up, an Orange Lake, a massive crater next to an intact volcano in Alaska. Some really weird-looking Alaskan coastline. Hope you don't have trypophobia. Geometric tundra blocks formed by frost wedging. A very colorful rock glacier in Colorado. High mountain hoodoos. High desert hoodoos. Alaskan sand dunes. Yes, that's a real thing. And finally, insane fall colors in New Mexico on top of a mountain. Thank you to everybody on stream who has helped me find a lot of these features. Wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. It is time for my absolute favorite place that I found on Google Earth this year. It was a tough decision, but I have settled on the massive stair steps of stone I found in the Central Rocky Mountains. It was a very close call between these and the shark teeth flatirons that I found in southern Utah, because those were pretty insane to see in person as well. I definitely got some desktop background worthy footage there, and that might have been my most surprising and fun day out this year. But the massive stair steps of stone won out in my mind because of how difficult it was to see them. I first came across them on Google Earth when I was checking out some mountains that I wanted to summit over the summer. That's when I noticed a mountain that seemed to be completely comprised of these gigantic stone layers that looked a lot like a staircase. They seemed to be most prominent on the north side, so I decided the best way to see them would be to summit this incredibly tall mountain to the north. Judging from my measurements, I was going to have to climb over a vertical mile from the valley bottom to reach the summit of this peak. I drove out to the trailhead, and I began the hike in the early hours of the morning. I hiked up this canyon, across this pass, around the peak, and then ascended up 2,000 more feet of sheer stone and gravel to the summit. That part of the hike was the worst couple hours of my year. But I made it, and the view from the top was unbelievable, and the steps of stone were so much more impressive than I had imagined. I was brave enough to fly my drone in the howling winds at 12,000 feet, and it was worth it, because this is hands down the most insane footage I got this year. It was also the most difficult day physically that I've ever had, as it was my first time doing over 6,000 feet of elevation gain in a day. My legs were absolutely destroyed by the time I got back to my car, and I was basically stumbling downhill at that point. I do really want to go back and come up the other side of the mountain range and actually go set foot and climb on the stair steps of stone so I can truly appreciate how large they are, because I was still a ways away from the summit of this peak. For now, I'll have to keep watching back the footage I got that day until I can return. If you haven't seen the full video yet and want to check it out, definitely click on it right here. The algorithm didn't really like it, so it's probably the biggest hidden gem on my channel. Thank you guys so much for all the support in 2025.